All right, before we can continue on with experimenting with the various prototyping, I'm going to create, or we rather, are going to create a navigation first. Now, in the navigation section earlier in the course, or the curriculum rather, we already experimented with the prototyping of a navigation. We're going to do it again just to solidify that to our muscle memory, and then we'll be able to get each of the subpages that are a part of this navigation working just to demonstrate various prototyping techniques. So before, when we created a mobile navigation, when somebody clicked on this menu right here, it would slide out here from the right and push over, and it consumed about three-fourths or so, or 2/3 of the screen. And that's a perfectly fine way, or a fine pattern to use for mobile navigation. But if you have a few links, you can also just make it pull in from the top. So that's the type of navigation we're going to do this time. So the first thing I'll do is we're going to just use an existing artboard for this, but then we're going to create a frame specifically for the mobile header navigation, and then we'll create a component out of it and we'll be able to reuse it across all of our different frames. So for now, we're just going to design it right here in the home page. It'll be roughly this tall or so. And for our fill, we have a lot of subjective options here. I'm just going to use our primary color right here. Now again, if you wanted to use all the appropriate colors and such, we would want to add this color here. And let me double click into that, and we'll simply come over here, we'll add a new style, we'll call it primary color. All right, and then we will come out here and choose primary color as well. Okay, so what we can also do is, because it's coming on and it's hiding the logo, we can actually have just a white version of the logo sitting on top of here as well. So I'm going to come down here, we're going to find our logo component, we're going to Control D to duplicate it and then bring it right back up, and then change it from black to white. All right, next up, I want to hide, or rather lessen the opacity of this background container so that we can see exactly where this menu sits. Additionally, we don't have to do that. We could also just bring it back to 100% and select the frame and just bring back our columns, and then we can kind of see where roughly right here, if we zoom up, where we need to place it essentially. And so when you open up the menu, you want an actionable place, a call to action for people to be able to close the menu. So an X button is perfect for that. So we'll right click, go to plugins, Iconify, and then we will just choose close. And we will choose perhaps just a simple X. All right, we'll use a rounded corner X, this one right over here. So we'll just drag it on, and we're going to position it right around here. Now, depending on where you're pushing it, sometimes it might go into an existing frame like our other icon, and we don't want that. What we can do is, just so we can see how large it is in relation to this, we want to keep them around the same size. We can also just bring it back over here. And again, what I will do just temporarily is I'll select that, let's see here. We'll select this element and we will lock it, and we're just going to put it right on top. And mind you, ours will be not black, it'll be white. And we can kind of just push this right over here. We'll bring this back and we'll make this white and bring back this opacity to 100%. All right. So that's looking good. We can go ahead and close this out here so we can hide that. Additionally, I do want some separation, so we can create a very subtle drop shadow on this container right here. So we can add an actual effect, which is a drop shadow by default. We can see it does give us just some separation right here, but we can also play around with the settings. So if we want it to be a little bit more so, like maybe push it down slightly more and increase the blur. But right there is pretty solid as is. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and create the components that sit on top of it. And now would be a good time also for us to bring the grid back, or the 4 column grid rather. And we're just going to left click around here somewhere where we want the first link to go. So we're going to put it right here, home. And we're looking at the size here, 22. This looks to be pretty decent. I might make it a tad bit smaller, just to around 20 or so. And that's looking solid. And remember, we want to do a few things here. We're going to use auto layout because we're going to have 4 of them stacked on top of each other. We also want to make each button itself a component with different states as well, like an active state, for instance. Typically on a mobile, you're not worrying about hover states simply because you don't have hover states essentially on mobile. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead, and what I want to do is just create a rectangle around it. And we will hide this column for a second. And then we'll grab the current color, but we'll make it a little bit darker. Just a few shades darker. So that happens to be 6223E8 for the color code if you want to follow along. All right, and we're going to put it underneath home. And we're going to get this centered up here. By the way, we can also add this. For instance, we can call this primary color dark. All right. And then we can go ahead and take both of these and we can create a component. Control-Alt-K. And now we could take these 3 elements, or 4 rather. You want to make sure you have the logo, the close button, the background, and this button right here. And we can now create a frame out of it. So right click, frame selection. This can now be moved off of here. And perhaps we'll just put it up here. All right. And this is also here a component, and we can just move this off to the side and we can create a variant out of it. So we're going to click on variants. And this one right here, we'll just name this not hover, but rather active. All right, so the default state right here, the original one, we're gonna go ahead and change that background to the same color as this background. And you'll see why here in a second. So we can come here and just choose that color. All right, so now what we can do is go to our assets and we can drag this on. Now for our home, we do want that to be the active one by default, but we're not going to set that yet. We're just going to duplicate this, hold it down to where we see that little guide, and then duplicate it 2 more times. So we're going to have a total of 4 different links. And we could also change this one here to active. So it's a nice color, it kind of just lets us know our current page. It's just one way in which you can denote an active page. You can also change the link color. You can add an underline. You could do all sorts of things, but this is just one way. Now we're going to take all of them and create an auto layout out of it. And this simply allows us to rearrange these if we wish, add more easily, etc. So now we can change this type here to download brochure. We're also going to change this type here to gallery. We're going to create a gallery, and then also a contact page that has a Google, sort of like a Google Maps view that you can easily move around. So we'll be doing that in the coming lessons. All right, so this is our frame right here. What we can do now by selecting the entire frame is we can create, if we go back to layers, we'll see if we toggle this frame on and off or hide the visibility, it includes everything. So what we'll do now is create a component out of it. So let's create component. And now we can go to prototype. So this is where the fun begins. Prototyping is always very fun. So, by the way, I kind of hid that or locked that for a second. So now when somebody clicks on this, we want them to go here, and it's going to on click. It's not going to navigate to, it's going to open overlay. Now with our overlay options, so I've clicked play here and I moved over the prototype over here just so we can see what's happening. If we click on this now, by default it's centered it, and that's not exactly what we want, clearly. So what we can do is we can come out here, we can click on this interaction. Right here we could say top left, for instance, and that works out just fine. You can also do custom, not right here, sorry. We can also click on manual rather, and we can manually position it as we did before in the other first lesson when it came to navigations. So this right here works just fine. We also have animation types, so we can move it in actually. So we can move it and make it just come down from the top. So now if we go back, I'm just gonna refresh this real quickly. We click on it, it's gonna come down. And look at that, it looks great. I think it's a little bit too much white space here. So what we do is just double click, I gain access to it and move it up to roughly around where you think it should go. And again, we can move things around specifically inside of here, maybe move this down. And I think that's perfect right there. All right, great. So that is almost it. We now need to finish making our connections here. So what we'll do now is in the exit button, we'll go back to prototype, and we will simply push this back to the home page. Or rather, instead of going back to the home page, we'll just add an interaction manually. On click, it's simply going to close the overlay. So that way it's not going to always go to the home page. It'll just close the overlay depending on which page it's on. We can also take this right here button and we're going to add a connection there. So on click, navigate to our animation. Again, we can smart animate this stuff if we wish. 300 milliseconds seems to be fine right there. Download brochure, we'll push it to here as well. And then our logo right here, we can push this to the home page. When somebody clicks on a logo on a website, typical pattern is that it goes to the main page or the home page. In the case if they're logged in, it might go to a dashboard or something like that. And so it looks like this is pretty good for now. So let's see how this all reacts. So let's close that out. I click on this. We'll go to download brochure. That works. Click on this. It still works on this page as well. We'll go to home. And there you go. Everything is working quite solid. So in the next lesson, we're going to get more experience here with prototyping and looking at some more features that we haven't yet covered.